You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is August 7th, 2024, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special show on some of the issues around critical race theory. So we're going to kind of be focused on that topic today and other issues in the news kind of around that. And we have a special guest to talk to us about that, George Maurer. He is the author of Critical Race Theory in Your Schools and How to Fight Back. So, in fact, James, maybe I could bring up the visual right here too on the book so people can see that. So here it is on Amazon, so you can check that out. And he also has a Facebook page as well that you can check out, and that is also, you can find that by searching for critical race theories in your school. And I also happen to have the book too, so I had a chance to at least peruse it a little bit before the.
Thank you for that. I appreciate
it. Okay, and so before we get into that, let me introduce you to the rest of the panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have Dr. George Maurer. He is our special guest today. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. Possibly we'll have our Screaming Eagle of Freedom jumping in at some point, Tim Everett. So we'll see if he pops in today. One of the announcements I also wanted to make as well, here in Sacramento in about 6 weeks or so, James, maybe you could bring up the visual, the We the People Constitution Study Group is going to be doing a special Constitution Day celebration out in Folsom. So you can check that out. It is going to be, I believe, in the park at Folsom. It says Folsom City Lions Park from noon to 4. And that is going to be on September 15th. So it's a great place to go meet people and see what's going on out there in Folsom. People who are interested in the Constitution and defending your rights. It looks like our Screaming Eagle of Freedom just dropped in. So hey, Tim, how you doing?
Good. Thank you.
So let's get to our Liberty quote of the day. So we always start off with the Liberty quote, and this one is kind of related to the CRT issue. In fact, this was a quote that came from Clarence Thomas after one of the recent decisions they made about, I guess, getting rid of some of the equity programs that they had at Harvard. And he said, it is an immutable fact that every time the government uses racial criteria to bring the races together, someone gets excluded, and the person excluded suffers an injury solely because of his or her race. So I think it couldn't be more spot on that when government gets into something, usually makes a mess of things, and it may feel like it's solving a problem for one guy, but then it creates a problem for another guy, another person. What do you guys think about this quote? I think it's pretty spot on.
I think it is as well. And it just kind of goes to show you, just whenever you use racial criteria, which is supposed to be illegal since 1964, not only is it wrong morally, it's illegal in this country and should not be used. And theoretically, they should be sued out of existence in some shape, form, or manner. Whatever that rule is, it needs to go away.
You see this, and I totally agree. But this whole thing about affirmative action and CRT and all these things is all rooted in this injustice that was done to blacks in America, and now everybody's trying to live off of that supposed injustice. Now the people who committed the injustice are dead. The people who suffered the injustice are dead, but still we are trying to keep it alive through all of these so-called social justice programs like affirmative action. Who could disagree with that? That sounds like such a nice word, doesn't it? Affirmative action. But if the government is making choices upon people based upon race, they're also making choices that benefit, say, blacks or other minorities. Those same choices are also disadvantaging other people, maybe whites. But we cannot say that an injustice as was done in the past can be made up by a new set of injustice in the present. And this is where these programs fail and will continue to fail. They do nothing but create divisions within our society. And this is why Clarence Thomas is absolutely correct.
Yeah, Leon, if I could share this with you, if you don't mind. Tucker Carlson just interviewed a man by the name of Vince Everett Ellison. He is an African American. And
I
during
know he
this,
is, yes.
okay, during this interview, he said between the years of 1940 and 1960, the Black community cut poverty at a rate from 80% in the African American community down to 35% within 20 years by themselves. Slavery could not take down the African American community. Jim Crow could not take down the African American community. It wasn't until the government got involved to help the
Yes,
African American community that's when they began experiencing real problems.
absolutely.
Since, I wouldn't say as bad as slavery, of course, but it's a bad problem. The African American community has some real issues, and it all has to do with government help.
Absolutely. I don't know, George, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Thomas Sowell,
I am.
well-known author, written, I don't know, a ton of books. I've read many of them. And he have covered this very issue that you're raising, that where Tucker was talking to this guy. So these facts are well known, are well out there, but
Yes.
these social justice warriors who trying to save us Black people, they find it convenient to ignore them.
Agreed.
Tim, did you have something you wanted to jump in on? It looked like you were about to scream, and then you're screaming a little freedom here. But
right, yeah, I've been screaming a little too much here just recently. So, fortunately for me, I work in the private enterprise system, so I don't get to, like the government people can, when clock strikes 5, I get to go adios, but not in my job. I'm done. I'm there until the job gets done. So the job took a little longer than normal. That's why I'm late. But and I was just going to say that I wish I had an example. Dr. Maurer came out with a good example there of what Judge Thomas was referring to. And Leon, I think you had something too a little more concrete than I would have thought of. But anyway, yeah, I like the quote. Like I say, I wish I had some concrete examples, but I'm sure there are plenty of them out there.
Well, George, one of the things that you mentioned too, and I kind of take from his quote is that, aside from not even helping the community, it seems like all this help has hurt the community. And it's funny because, Thomas's quote talks about bringing the races together is a lot of times what these things claim they're going to do, but they wind up dividing us, and it's just
without
horrible.
a doubt. Without a doubt. We have an example out of a couple of different states, but there is an advanced placement African American studies program that's been under test for the last 2 years, and now it's having problems passing states for that final certification. And the thing is, Stanford, and I talk about this in my book, but Stanford University research says that ethnic studies, real ethnic studies, positive ethnic studies, helps young students of color, in particular, at risk young students of color in particular. They learn who they are, they learn about their histories, they learn about, it brings a self-awareness, a self-confidence. Here are the positive contributions of your group of folks to this country. And and all of the groups have a great many contributions to this nation. They really do. And when you teach it to those children, absenteeism goes down, teen pregnancy goes down, trouble goes down, teen drinking goes down, all of that goes down, and all of the positives go up. The problem is the people who created this advanced placement African American studies program, they just couldn't help themselves, and they had to insert critical race theory, which is a relentless and tight focus on only our worst moments. They cover things, I looked through it a little bit, not completely, but they talk about the Black Panther Party and how they were helping for civil rights. Okay. They were giving free breakfasts to poor folks. Okay, good. But they also embraced violence and murder and Marxism in their as their tactics, and they never talk about the Marxism part. They talk about the violence a little bit, but it's this embracing of Marxism which has been such a problem, really. And the African Studies program never talks about that. And South Carolina they were about to pass a law that banned critical race theory. They didn't call it critical race theory, but anything that taught one race is superior to another, et cetera, et cetera. And now they're going through this thing with Georgia. And Georgia's got a law.
Before you go
Okay.
on too much farther, I did want to stop you real quick just at the beginning of the discussion and kind of get
Okay.
out. And I think you talk about it in your book too, but what exactly is critical race theory?
Okay.
Because we hear people talk about that all the time. And of course, you brought up ethnic studies, and we also hear terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it seems like there's a scattershot all over the place. What is CRT?
Yeah, it's important to explain that up front. And I apologize for getting ahead of ourselves here. But ethnic studies, as I just said, is the positive, healthy learning of one's culture, which is a good thing. And when you learn about yourself, it's a good thing. It helps you with everything. It helps you learn what your gifts are. I mean, this isn't new news. This is in the Bible. It's a couple thousand years old. Use your gifts to help others. So that is ethnic studies. Hey, young African American man, here are the patriots that were around during the Revolutionary War. Here's all of the people that have contributed to the scientific knowledge of this nation. Here are all the African Americans who have contributed to the culture, the art, the music. Here's the influence in our society, and they are great and many. And this builds pride, and it should. Again, however, when you get into critical race theory, again, it's only the very worst moments without giving due credit to the progress that we've made over the last 175, 50 years. And we have come a long, long way. And, I believe we were one of the first nations on earth to ban slavery in the manner that we did. Our nation suffered, almost fell apart completely battling slavery. Doesn't that count for something? So, but then we have DEI. DEI and CRT are very similar. Let me get into the definition. CRT, again, is the negative, focused on the negative, but it is a Marxist oppressor versus oppressed ideology. And that's the important thing to remember about this. This is based in Marxism. Marx, back 100 so years ago, they were using class to divide people. They're using race to divide people right now. And unfortunately, it is a very effective method to divide people. It's scary. If you're a white person, someone calls you a racist, most white people immediately back down because they're afraid. And I understand why. The last thing they want to be called or known as is a racist. And but that is, CRT is, again, this Marxist ideology. DEI is basically the exact same thing, but it tends to be called DEI more in the workplace. CRT
and just for the audience, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So
diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you so much for keeping me straight on this. And yes, DEI is more work. CRT is more school. And you were saying that all they do is change the name and keep trucking on. And that's basically what they do. The real quick, I know we want to continue on, but the DOD has a ban against social justice. And so the Air Force had a DEI program. They testified before Congress they were going to get rid of it. And all they did was shuffle around the resources, shuffle around the money, and they renamed their program to Systemic Equality. Nothing really changed. It was all the content still remained, but it just had a new name. And the DODEA, the Department of Defense education activity, I believe, which is the DoD schools overseas, the Department of Defense schools. When a service member goes and lives in Japan, he takes his family with him, so they've got a school on base where they go, just like they would here in the States. The DoDEA did the exact same thing. Oh, we're getting rid of all that. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And all they did was shuffle the resources around to hide it, but nothing really changed. And so that's what we're up against. These people are not, you can make a law. That's fine. Make a rule. But they're not going away. They've been doing this since the time of Marx, since the mid 1800s. And that's what, again, you got to keep in mind. These are Marxists, and their goal is the destruction of capitalism, freedom, the Western civilization, and the nuclear family. And that has never changed. It's been that way since the days of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, when they created this garbage.
Well, they were quite successful in destroying the black family.
Yes, they were
in America, because
yes,
they
they were.
If you look at single parent kids born into single mothers in the 1960s, it was like a 25% rate. Now today, here we are, all of these years later, we have made so much progress, but the single parent rate in black families about 75% or something like that, some astronomical number like that.
It's
and
crazy.
This is kind of sick and crazy. You know what is, at the root of all of this thing, all of this nonsense, is the racist presumption that people like me, black people, we need help. And these white liberals are the one who's going to provide this help. No offense meant here, but I really have a problem here. They always think we need help. And look at what they're doing right now in the schools. They're helping. Right. Public schools, I'm talking. They're helping. But now we go through, say, like Baltimore. You go to Baltimore and you go through, I think 23 high schools, and they can't find a kid who could do math at grade level. And this is the help that they're providing. Okay? So this is the problem. The underlying root of all of these things is that racist presumption that people like me, oh God, we need help.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. The white liberals, even Malcolm X made a statement during the 60s that the white liberals, and Malcolm X was a Marxist too, let's be honest here. But he said, white liberals are not only the enemy of this nation, they are the enemy of the African American community. I believe he used the word Negro, which was the word at that time.
He did, yes.
But he wasn't wrong, and we're talking about a 75% single parent family thing. If I remember correctly, and I forget where I heard this, we were talking about 1940 to 1960, where the African community made tremendous progress. The African American family was more intact, two-parent homes, one of the single most intact family units, better, more than white families. So that kind of gives you an idea just how far the African American family has fallen with the help of the government.
Oh, yes, man. They're always there to help us,
Yes.
Well, George, one of the things I always like to find out is how somebody got into, I guess, their pursuit of liberty or whatever it is that they're driving towards here. And for you, I guess this focus on critical race theory, what was it that got you interested in studying that? And also too, it sounds like you're also very liberty oriented too, talking about, this is, got some Marxist leanings to it. What sort of rang your liberty bell? Because I mean, this is not stuff. If you were to sit in a regular school classroom, a government school, you'd be being said, "Hey, this is all good stuff. This is all okay." So clearly, you got this somewhere else. So, what was it that rang your liberty bell on all this stuff?
So how did an average white boy get so involved with CRT? Basically, is what you're trying to wonder.
Yeah.
It's simple. When I was in the military, began using Facebook. I retired from the Air Force in 2010, and I was on Facebook. And I was a conservative, but not overly. I kept my opinions to myself because I was still wearing a uniform. And when you're in the military, you're not supposed to be overtly political. At least you can't tie it to the service. So I tried to keep it to a dull roar, let's say. But once I retired, all the gloves came off, man. And so I became very outspoken, and you would be surprised at how many liberals there are in government service, civilian, in uniform, I mean, the whole 9 yards. And so as soon as I came out as conservative, a lot of people who I thought were my friends suddenly began calling me a racist. And I don't know if you've ever been called a racist, but it is a pretty crappy thing to be called. It's a pretty disgusting thing to throw at somebody, especially if it has nothing to do with racism. And most of my comments don't. But oh, you're a racist. You're a racist. If you don't take that back, I'm going to unfriend you. Unfriend me. What are you going to hurt my feelings? Go away. I'm really going to do it. Well, do it. What are you still here for? And so I went through a lot of that, and I had to develop a thick skin against people being called a racist. And so when I began to go through my doctoral degree, I had to, create a dissertation, and of course, and so this thing called critical race theory was out there, and I knew I needed to do something that was going to keep my interest. And being called a racist so many times, I knew this would keep my interest for a couple of years at least. And then as I was writing my dissertation, I was like, you know what? I'm going to turn this into a book. I'm going to academic ease it. I'm going to take it out of academia language, and I'm going to make it into basic English so your average person can read it and understand it. Because what I saw was a real need. There were parents who had questions, didn't know what it was. They looked it up. Everything online said it's the greatest thing in the world. It's here to fight racism. But when you really dig into it a little bit, you find it's exactly the opposite. Just like you said, Jason, it's inflaming racism. It's not making it better. And so, so that's why being called a racist and realizing there was a need out there, parents needed help. So I wrote this book to hopefully help them.
Okay. Yeah, so no, that's definitely interesting to hear. I know it's funny you mentioned that we'd be surprised at how many liberals are in government, and we're in California, so we wouldn't be surprised at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
And Leon, man, I don't even have to know your history. I already know it. They attack you way more vicious than they would attack me because,
George, I just heard you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're a race trader, my friend. Yep.
Anyway, as you were speaking about being called a racist and that kind of stuff, I didn't want to interrupt your speech, but I was going to tell you that there's nothing more difficult. I mean, I'm sure it's not good that people call you racist and all the other things. But anytime you find a black conservative in America, man, the only thing they don't do to us is to lynch us. Seriously, I am not joking. I mean,
I know.
Uncle Tom, sellout, race traitor.
I mean,
know. You name it. We go down the list.
Well, remember. Well, I was going to say when Clarence Thomas was up for his hearings, right, in order to be confirmed as a Supreme Court justice, he called it a high-tech lynching. That's what he labeled it. So
he wasn't wrong.
Exactly.
He wasn't wrong.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is because to get into the focus of the schools, since that's where you really focus on the book, you talk about one of the first things you say is, and we've seen this happen a lot to all of us, is that the school, when you say, hey, you're teaching CRT or DEI or something like that, they will immediately say, no, we're not teaching that. And that's one of the things you focus on in the book is that they're just outright lying to you. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, there are schools that are lying. Absolutely. Riverside Unified, California. They had some teachers' meetings in 2021, and they were saying, parents were upset about CRT. They were asking about it, and the school board goes, we don't teach critical race theory. And there was this one passage where the school board president was like, ma'am, I don't know if you've been paying attention or not, but we do not teach critical race theory. And so, the problem was 1 year earlier, that very same school board voted on and approved an ethnic studies program, CRT, not ethnic studies, and it had 27 learning objectives in it. 4 of those learning objectives had the words critical race theory in their title. 11 more directly alluded to CRT tenets and principles. So of the 27 learning objectives, more than half were directly related to critical race theory. And if the school board, as they were telling, either they were lying through their teeth to parents, because either the same people that presented this thing a year ago, or they were incompetent. Oh, we don't remember what we did a year ago. It's completely lost on us. I mean, are they stupid or are they lying? And I think I know, I believe I know the answer, and it's they're lying. That's why my first chapter of my book, yes, they're lying to you. And I proved it over and over in a couple of different situations.
But you see, the thing is, George, and I think you probably will have identified this. These people always get these nice sounding names, to make it sound like there's something nice and wonderful. Look at this thing, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, you sit down and think about all those nice words, diversity. Okay, who would be against that? Equity, oh my goodness. Inclusion, who would be against that? But when you read the fine print and see what it is they are trying to do, it's nothing but a bunch of warmed over racism, Jim Crow type things is what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Trying to give favor to someone based upon their skin color or their ethnic identity. That's all they're trying to do. And then they're trying to lie to us and tell us, no, we have these nice, sweet things called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's so wonderful. You will just love it,
Until they take a group of kindergarten kids and they say, okay, we're going to talk about freedom today. Let's explore these sentences. Whites have more than blacks. Whites oppress blacks. Whites harass people of color. You must fight in a war, and threatening body language. And that really happened. And that's somebody sent a photo of their kindergartners' school lessons to Libs of TikTok, and I talk about that in my class. I don't know adults who could have that conversation in a mature manner. Now imagine what it does to 5 and 6-year-old children. All of it on purpose, by the way.
Trying to teach kids to hate each other before they even have a chance in life. Trying to teach kids to hate each other.
Yep.
I did have some stuff on woke kindergarten that I wanted to bring in later, but I think I'm actually going to bring it in now because this goes spot on to what you're talking about. But as we're getting near the end of the half hour, if you're on public access, you're going to have to catch the rest of this conversation online. So if you want to hear us talk about this and some of the other issues of how this issue, CRT and DEI, are playing out in the election, 2024 election too, come and check out the rest of that conversation, and you can find a lot of other conversation to be out there as well. So back to the show. So I wanted to bring this, we talked about this a while back with another guest about a year ago, and it's this thing called woke kindergarten. And so James, maybe you could bring this up. Yeah, so there's our invisible hand bringing in our picture here of all the little hands in the woke kindergarten. Yeah, so this is essentially a program that was running in the Bay Area and here in California. So that's like near San Francisco. And they actually wound up getting rid of it after a couple of years because they found out that everybody's educational literacy was getting worse who was involved in the program as they were trying to measure the results. Yeah, but we did have a video so we can kind of show what it is that gets taught in some of these deranged classrooms, where they take these little kids and they kind of divide them and propagandize them to, really put politics in at an age where it's really inappropriate. So James, maybe you could bring up the video KOL 5. So that's one of the later ones we were planning on showing.
Difference by Key, woke kindergarten. Can you spot the difference? 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 Now, can you find something that's the same?
So there you go. That was a little short clip of one of the many lessons they have on their website that they expose children to who really have no basis to, most children of even, understanding the underlying politics of any of these images and how potentially loaded those scenes were that were set up and contrasted with one another. But I mean, it just, this is the type of stuff that's being put in there. In fact, we even had here in near Sacramento or Natoma School District, about a year and a half ago, they had Project Veritas blew the lid off of some teacher who literally had pictures of Mao and other, communist leaders in the classroom. And he was giving the kids extra credit to go to protest rallies that were essentially leftist protest rallies to join in on those rallies. and Project Veritas got them talking all about it. Anyways, they wound up dismissing that teacher, but it actually cost the district quite a bit of money to do. They actually, I think, had to pay the guy out in the end. So it seems like there's no loss for a lot of these guys. But is that kind of what you're seeing around the country when you talk about CRT in the schools? Oh, sorry, George, you're muted. Looks like you're muted, George. I think.
George, you're muted.
Okay, there you go. It sounds like you're back.
Okay. Yeah. Activism is part of it. Again, this CRT is basically, it's a classic brainwashing technique, believe it or not. It's the same one used by Red China, Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, all of them. And what it does is it teaches your children that America is bad, your family is bad, your skin color is bad, you are bad. And once you do that, you can insert anything you want. But for example, the California Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum, which is mandatory, starting with the class of 25 and 26, the school year of 25 and 26, where 1 year of ethnic studies is required to graduate. 4 Englishes, 3 maths, 2 sciences, and 1 ethnic studies course is the new standard in California starting next year. And part of the sample lessons is participation in a local activist social justice group. I think there's 3 or 4 of them. Chapter 4 or 5 is about the California Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum, and I talk about it a little bit. But I mean, this stuff is not going away. If you live in California, starting next year, and there's a lot of school districts that have already started using it, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, Riverside, they've all started some form of this, and studying the tactics of these social justice activist groups. Pick a subject, pick a local group, come up with a topic, and go. And create your campaign to change the world with this particular subject. Mandatory. So yeah, it's going on, and I do talk about Tennessee, North Carolina, but as we've read in the news, these issues are going on in South Carolina, Georgia. No matter where there's like 17 states that had to create laws banning various forms of critical race theory. So yeah, it's going on all over the place. Of course, California embraces it openly.
Yes. The sad thing about all of this is that they're so very good at trying to teach these people all this social justice garbage, and they seem to ignore the most fundamental thing, which is to teach the kids reading, writing, and arithmetic. That seems to take a second place to all this DEI, and all this other nonsense that they want to stuff into our kids' brains.
Yeah, this was an issue for the Tustin School District. They began using something called equity math, and what happens is, instead of teaching math, they siphon off some of that time to teach social justice. And a whole bunch of like 1,200 STEM professors got together, wrote a letter to the state and said, hey, equity math is bad because you're creating a brave new mathless future for mathematics. And again, the Air Force is going through the same thing. When you teach social justice, you take the real lessons out of the classroom, so they will be less prepared in math. But it's also going on in the military. The military found that their military readiness is down because of the resources that they've diverted into social justice programs. The military is basically designed to break things and kill people. And the Air Force in particular is less capable of doing those things today because of DEI programs.
Yeah.
Well, when you mentioned math too, and just to give a concrete example of that as well here in California, Jane, maybe you could bring this up. This is the California Department of Education page, and this is their math framework page for 2023. And if you look at it, they don't say specifically CRT, and they don't say specifically DEI. But if you look here, chapter 2 in the math framework is teaching equity and engagement. And then they talk about structuring school experiences for equity and engagement. And it seems like this language, they just keep on getting trickier and trickier about how to hide it. But I remember it was a couple years ago where there was a big blow up where they talked about some of the lessons that they were trying to get into the math framework, and this was one of them. They talked about this pathway to equitable math instruction, and you can see right here in this Strides program, right away, dismantling racism in mathematic instruction. Right at the front of it.
That is equity math. They're not teaching math; they're teaching dismantling racism in mathematics.
Yeah.
So now your children are going to get less skilled in actual math and more skilled in social justice. And that, again, that is equity math right there. Perfect example.
Yeah.
And I guess while we're here, one of the things real quick, if you think your child is being exposed to CRT and you're not sure, you can go online, look at the class descriptions, just like this one, and look for those things: racism, white supremacy, marginalization, oppression, systemic racism. And when you see those types of phrases, chances are your kid is being exposed to critical race theory. You're not going to see the words critical race theory out there anymore because schools are hip, or the schools know that parents are hip to those words. They don't like them. So they've removed those sentences, those 3 words, but the content remains behind. So that's what you look for.
Yeah. It seems like the word that is kind of the buzzword nowadays is equity, even if they're not showing the others, and it's just a way to kind of slide this stuff in. I thought it might be useful too, just to pull this one visual up. This is one I've seen used a lot, but it talks about equality and equity. And I think most people, when they hear the word equity, they assume we're talking about equality and, sort of everybody essentially being left alone by the government to have the government's not going to bias itself against anybody. But that's not what we're really talking about with equity. It's something where the government is going to decide what it thinks is sort of equal, and it's going to then rearrange things with people to try and I guess get to something it calls equity. And here they have a picture that sort of shows an example of what they think is equality and equity, and they show here's a situation on the left that has 3 people trying to watch a game over a fence, and they all have one box, so it's supposedly equal, but they are not having the same experience, where I guess they're imagining if the government comes in and rearrange the boxes for you, then suddenly they'll make everything better. As we kind of talked about earlier, it doesn't usually work out that way, but that's what they're imagining is going to happen here. So is that kind of your understanding, George, of this whole equity and equality thing and what they're trying to?
I mean, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about. And again, we get back to how much of someone else's stuff is your fair share? How much of that is your fair share kind of an idea?
Exactly.
But, we were talking about the African American Advanced Placement African American Studies program, which, if the government hadn't gotten involved and hadn't forced their CRT in there, chances are this program would be cruising through, and all of these at-risk students of color would be getting it today and benefiting from it. But because the government got involved with their Marxist and leftist ideas, their equity, inserting them in, now they're having a problem getting to the people who need it the most. And that equity, again, it looks great, but again, that's not the way it works. Go to any Marxist government experiment anywhere. Venezuela is a very recent example. Had one of the best economies in the Americas behind the United States. I think it was the second best or third best, maybe behind Canada as well. But they had an oil and gas industry. They were doing great. And then a Marxist convinced the people that the oil and gas industry was taking advantage of them and they were not getting their fair share. So they voted in a Marxist. And next thing you know, 2 years later, they're shooting the dog because there's no food in the supermarket anymore. And now they just had another election. And apparently it looks like Maduro, I think his name is. And it looks like Maduro lost, but is trying to steal the election and try to stay in power. And now the military has stood up and said, you know what? The other guy won. We're going to enforce this. So, and that goes back to an old saying, you can vote your way into Marxism, but chances are you're going to have to shoot your way out. And that's kind of exactly what's going on with the folks down in Venezuela right now. And I pray that, there are 0 deaths, but history says otherwise. There's going to be blood.
It's funny, with that picture of the guys and rearranging the 3 boxes. I think in Venezuela's example, government told them they were going to rearrange those 3 boxes. In the end, the 3 boxes just disappeared.
Exactly.
And then nobody could see over the fence.
Exactly. You were going to make sure it's all fair. Your average Marxist, when they get enough power and authority to do the things that in order to make everything fair, what do? They give you one, they give you one, they give me one, they give everybody one, but they take 1,000 for themselves, 10,000, 1,000,000.
Yes.
Because that's human nature. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's never going to change. And Marxism in its classic form looks great on paper, but when you give someone that kind of authority, they will abuse it. And there's just, maybe the first guy won't, but the second guy, the third guy, it'll be out of control. Out of control.
Somebody in that chain of power will corrupt the system. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. The first guy might be wonderful. Maybe he might even do some things that we might classify as good. But always, human nature will always take over. You're absolutely right about this. And that corruption that we see in socialist and Marxist societies throughout this world will always end up at the bottom of the pit of economic well-being. Always.
History says it over and over and over and over.
There you go.
I was going to say that what the nuclear family does with the arrangement of those boxes is that dad takes the box from underneath the littlest kid, puts it underneath the middle kid, picks the littlest kid up and stands on the other box, and they all 3 get a much higher view.
Yes. Yes, but it's dad, not the government.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. The nuclear dad does it. The dad that cares the most for the kids, not Big Daddy or Mama government.
But that's the flaw in these socialist Marxist theories, is that somehow the government can care for you more than a mother or father can. That's the flawed thinking that some distant government here in Sacramento or in Washington D.C. they can care for. They could sit down and work out. Some bureaucrat could sit down and work out some life plan for you far better than your parents could or your grandmother could, and they keep on going with this damn nonsense, even though it have failed over and over again. the biggest failure, I guess you can probably say, is the Soviet Union. We know what happened to them, but they keep going for some reason. Every time they come up with these nice, seductive sounding words, and people just keep on falling for it, and they get the power, and the power just leads to more power, and it just become corrupted.
They go long enough till people forget how to make the boxes, and then nobody has any boxes anymore because there's nothing more to rearrange.
And then nobody can see over the fence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I did want to talk a little bit about how this spills on beyond just the K through 12 as well. And this was something I was thinking about hitting later, but I think it's probably more appropriate to bring it in now. And Jane, maybe you could bring up the visual. So one of the things that it doesn't just stop at K through 12. This winds up working its way into the universities, because the kids are all sort of conditioned. But it's also kind of weird because there's a sort of a circular feedback. The teachers come from the universities, they learn a lot of this stuff there, and then they go back and they teach it in the K through 12. But here they're talking about how with this Harvard recently decided to stop requiring DEI statements for faculty positions. So like if you were going to apply there for a job, you had to talk about your whole all of your what you were going to do in DEI. So it was like a litmus test. But there was a whole bunch of other things. This is one that Clarence Thomas's thing, his quote from the beginning of the show was referencing, and this had to do with the Harvard issue where they were discriminating against all these kids, and the Supreme Court tossed it, essentially said, hey, you got to stop doing this, Harvard. But this is one of the crazy things that came out of that, is that they had to develop metrics for discrimination, and they wound up saying, if you look at this, they had a personality rating, a personal rating for different races, and what they essentially decided was that their subjective ratings people at the college all decided that Asian people were the least personal of all the people, and of course, Black and Hispanic people were the most likable. So therefore they got higher ratings, and this is how they were able to sort of justify these things. So it works into the college admissions. Here's an issue of DEI in. Here at Duke, where I guess they were expecting people, they're saying expecting people to be on time is part of the white supremacy culture in Duke Medical School. Can you imagine that, thinking your doctor to be on time is somehow white supremacist or racist?
Well, and this is a good example of how the people that they pretend they're helping are the ones who suffer the most. Okay, you're a minority person of color going through medical school, and the whole time you believe showing up on time is not important. So you finally get your degree. You spend what, $250,000 getting this doctoral degree to be an MD, and you don't think showing up on time is important. What happens? You get fired. Now you got $250,000 in debt, and you don't have a job anymore because you've been fired because, you can't be responsible enough to show up on time somewhere. And it's crazy. And that other score, the thing that we had before then, groups like exactly right there. China has a social score that where your activity on social media, your spending, your video game time, your television time, all counts towards this social score. And if you do something wrong, they can turn off your bank accounts, they can do all kinds of things. That looks like the beginning of that score, but here. And so that when you
race-based though this time.
Yeah. But if you look at like the World Economic Forum, who is obviously working toward a Marxist future, if you're paying attention, and they are using China as the model for moving forward. And that's it right there. If you're not doing the right things and they're monitoring everything you do, if you're not doing the right things, your score goes down, your freedoms get stolen temporarily, maybe permanently. And that is what they're working for.
George, someone listening to what you just said may think, oh God, there goes another right-wing.
It sounds crazy. It sounds crazy. I know it does.
But I would just like to remind them, during the strike, the trucker strike, right there in Canada, supposedly one of the freest countries in the world, look at what they did to the truckers, and to the people who supported them. They got into their bank
Right.
accounts, they froze their bank accounts, they did all sorts of things to these people.
Right.
All sorts of civil rights violation that should have never occurred in a free nation, but it happened right there in Canada, our neighbor
Yep.
to the north.
And just because it sounds crazy doesn't mean it isn't true or
It's true.
real.
Yeah.
And I know this is crazy. It sounds crazy. I get it, but it's really happening. Open your eyes, because if you don't open your eyes, when you finally realize what's going on, it might be too late. So
Yeah.
the time to act is now. Now.
And when you talk about how crazy it's getting, I guess the peak craziness of all this, and Jane, maybe you could bring this up, but the Smithsonian Institute a few years ago, they literally put up, I mean, this is something that most of us assume is an objective institution. It's part of our big museum, collection, and in Washington, and it's sort of a repository of knowledge. And here they literally had put up this thing about white culture, and they since I believe they've taken this down since and apologized for it. But it wasn't just about being on time. They thought things like an emphasis on the scientific method was white. I mean, can you imagine how insulting that must be to a black person saying, well, yeah, you really shouldn't, thinking scientifically is being white. I mean, I just can't imagine how racist you have to be to think this way.
What an insult. God. Things like that, and I'm just gets my blood boiling a little bit. Just so racist. You're right, Jason. Exactly. So racist. And meanwhile, we're the racist ones, right? Not them.
Yeah.
They're the open-minded ones.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're talking to black folks like they're idiots. Crazy.
Let's just remember they're trying to help us, right? They're trying to help us.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
the crazy thing is too, how they keep trying to hide the ball is, I believe they pulled this down and apologized for it, but this is the current page that they have there at the Smithsonian. They have a whole thing about talking about race, and so a whole page on whiteness. So, I mean, the stuff like you think you're crushing it, and it pops up again in another format.
It's not going away. It's not going away. They're just going to rename it, and they're going to keep on trucking. This is their religion. When you're a Marxist, this is your religion.
Yeah.
And again, you have to understand all of this stuff is based in Marxism, whose ultimate goal is a world with Marxist governments in every nation, a one world Marxist global government controlling everything and reinventing society. And when China tried to reinvent their society, the Great Leap Forward, I think they called it, and they changed, how agriculture happened and, all of these things. And in like the first year, 5 million people starved to death. And they went back to Mao. Mao Zedong is the leader who was the one who installed this thing. And he went back the next year, and they're like, hey, 5 million people died. Okay, well, keep going, because it'll work out. It's gonna happen. It's gonna all fall into place. So keep going. The next million people, next year, like 10 million people died, starved to death. And they said, hey, Chairman, 10 million people starved to death this year. So what do you want to do? Keep going. It'll catch on. Yeah, it'll work. No worries. And then the next year, like 15 million people starved to death and died. And then he was like, well, yeah, maybe I was wrong about this. So, but it took like 35 million people to starve to death before he admitted his problem, and again, it was great that the people stood up to the Smithsonian and made them do that, but they're not going to change their mind. They just created the new whiteness page, and that's what you can expect. I mean, we need to stand up against this stuff, but when you do, don't expect them to go away, because they're not going anywhere.
Well, this really segues right into the question about your book, because your book, part of the title is How to Fight It. So I guess that's the next question. How do we fight this?
Well, first of all, you need to pay attention to your child's education. The days of just sending your kids off to school and trusting your school to do the right thing by your children are over. There's plenty of good schools out there. There are. But there are plenty of schools out there that are not. And so pay attention to what it is. Look at your child's course descriptions online. And again, you're not going to find the words critical race theory. We were talking about Riverside Unified and how they created this ethnic studies program with the words critical race theory in the lesson objectives. And so I actually sent a letter while I was writing the book to Riverside Unified. And I got the standard answer: we do not teach critical race theory here at Riverside Unified. Please check the online course description. I will check the online course description. And I found oppression, marginalization, white supremacy, systemic racism. I did not find the words critical race theory, but I found everything else but. So go out to those course descriptions online. They're on there. Look for them. Look for those keywords. The other thing you can do, get in touch with like-minded parents. Get together, stand together, begin creating a strategy. And in my book, New York University created specifically a toolkit, a media toolkit to use against critical race theory opponents. And it's very well written, actually. It's got some great advice in there. And one of my advice is, if you get my book, even if you don't have to get it, you can look it up if you want to.
Here's the book again.
Yeah, it's in there. But steal it. Steal the strategies in there. Come up with talking points, brainstorm with others, use that repetition. It's important, prepare yourself. For example, if you're going to go, one of the things that you should do is go to a school board meeting and make your position known. Now, understand that the people you're dealing with are professional victims. Okay. If you raise your voice, if you get upset, if you openly are hostile in any way, they're going to call the police on you. They're going to call you they may not call you a domestic terrorist, but you're going to be compared to a domestic terrorist and possibly even investigated as a domestic terrorist.
I think we even had some of that happen too during
we
the COVID period.
Yes, we did. The American Federation of Teachers wrote a letter to the president because there were parents getting upset across the country. And so they never, so they wrote a letter. Hey, can the FBI, using the Patriot Act, the powers of the Patriot Act, investigate these parents against these holy and benevolent school officials who are just trying to work for the good of your children? And so, and here's a, I don't want to get too far off, but here's a perfect example of a fact check. In the letter that the American Federation of Teachers wrote to the Department of Justice and the president, it said to consider using the powers of the Patriot Act and compared parents to possibly domestic terrorists.
Yes.
And now the Patriot Act, of course, was designed to investigate domestic terrorists. So, but the AP, the Associated Press, when they did a fact check on this letter, because they've got to defend it somehow, right? They're like, well, the American Federation of Teachers called parents domestic terrorists. And they say, that's false. Well, yeah, it was false, but that's not the question. The question was, did the teachers' unions ask for investigation against parents using the authority granted to investigate domestic terrorists? That was the real question. And see, they always do this little sleight of hand garbage. And we talk about that actually in that toolkit. But anyway, so you got to be aware of all those things. Let's get back to the speech. If you're going to go to the school board, make a speech. If you have 3 minutes, great. Write a speech that's 3 minutes long. Okay. Practice it. Do it in front of others, and when you get to the school board, make sure you've got it on your phone, make sure you've got it on paper, and you're probably going to be scared. Your voice might even be shaking a little bit, but the important thing is don't get angry. If you want to sit there and stare at your phone and just read off your phone, fine. You don't need eye contact with those people up there, but you got to maintain control of your actions, because if you let it go, if you lose control of yourself, you may be investigated as a domestic terrorist. And it's, it's natural for a parent to get upset about this. They're lying to you, and your mama, papa bear senses, they kick in because these are your children. Of course, you're supposed to protect them. It's the most natural thing in the world. But they will use it against you. They're smart. They're slick. And you got to be aware of that.
Do you know of any parents in the past that have been investigated after losing their temper? Not necessarily
the letter,
an inhuman thing, but after losing their temper and being called out by the school board and then being investigated, have they been prosecuted, imprisoned? What, they take them out back, beat them with a 2x4, they shoot them in the head? I mean, what's the end result of all?
Well, the only thing I did not I did not look into that. And you know what? I need to, actually. Thank you for bringing that up. But what I did mention was there were 3 or 4 people mentioned directly in the letter that was sent from the teachers union to the Department of Justice and to the President of the United States. And they mentioned like 4 examples, I believe, of parents who had crossed the line. And so, but I don't know what became of those things. And, but you know what? That is a really interesting subject, and I'm gonna look into that. I will follow up with that because I want to know that myself. Now that you bring it up,
I would like to answer. I would like to answer that question, Tim.
Okay.
We spoke about it on this show. As a matter of fact, there was a guy in Loudoun County. He went to the school board meeting because his daughter was raped in one of the bathrooms, and they didn't arrest the people who tried to cover it up. They arrested the guy, the father, because he was objecting in the meeting. His daughter was raped, and they were covering it up. I think the guy, they finally dropped the charges or whatever and stuff like that. He was arrested and charged, but I think they finally dropped it. But
it was like West Virginia or some place, or Virginia or West Virginia.
It's Virginia, Loudoun County, Virginia. I do remember that. Yep.
Yes.
And the kid who did the raping raped not 1, but I believe 2 young ladies.
Yes. He was transferred to another school where he did do a second rape. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Don't solve the problem. No, don't do that.
Slightly different woke topic. Yeah.
Solving problems by punishing crime is a white saying.
Well, there are George Soros installed district attorneys across this country, and that's exactly what they do. They ignore crime. You commit a crime and they let you out the next day. If you're in San Francisco, you can steal up to $950 worth of stuff without ever being arrested. They get something just came out the other day, and I think I posted this story on my Facebook page, where George Soros, his groups are paying members of the press to downplay the crime spikes that occur because of these policies, and to pretend it's not really going on. But you know what? These people are walking around in their cities and their hometowns. They got eyes. They can see. I don't know if you've been in LA lately, but it's horrible. It's horrible. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, you could drive to LA without seeing homeless encampments on both sides of the street, all the way down the street. Now, forget it. They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Well, part of my interest in firearms is you listen to podcasts, and some of the people interviewed on the podcast are police officers and people involved in law enforcement in various ways. And a lot of them are saying that the reporting now is no longer being done. In other words, there's this crime, but they're not being reported. And so they don't make it into the FBI database. And so I don't know if there is a broader, like a top-down, centrally planned lack of reporting for those reasons or what, but they are definitely underreported today,
Yeah.
and that's why you see some of the stats that we're looking at.
Well, let's not dive too far into that.
Okay.
We're already over time.
Okay.
But George, I did want to ask you, because we are over an hour. Did you want to stick around for how DEI is factoring into the election, or did you just want to get right to the knucklehead noise patrol?
I'm happy to answer another question or two, and then we can kind of begin to wrap it up. No problem.
Okay,
No problem.
well, there was one last question I wanted to ask you on the school issue, and that is there legal help out there that you would recommend people going to get assistance on this type of thing?
Well, chances are, if you're in a large city, you may find something that helps. There is an organization in San Diego called CFER, California Foundation for Educational Rights, or something like that. CFER, CFER, and they're not suing the San Diego Unified School District, but they are in the middle of an administrative action against them. And again, this was something that I mentioned in my book, because they brought in a lady by the name of Dr. Bettina Love, and who has made a career of something called spirit murdering. And they had mandatory teacher training where the white teachers were told that you spirit murder children of color all day long. And you need this training. You need to apologize. You need to, whatever the agenda was, to undo the damage that you're doing to these children just by being white and having them to be people of color. And so CFER brought up this, and again, this was in my book, brought this administrative action to San Diego. I did email them a few months back to find out what is the latest, and they said nothing has happened in the last year or two, because San Diego Unified is doing their own investigation, and of course they're slow walking it, as far as as slow as they can, basically. So I don't know if there's going to be any real resolution on that anytime soon, but the training, the one of the teachers, it was online. Unfortunately for the school district, it was online, and the teachers were warned very, very directly: you will not record this, you will not share this information with anyone. But one brave teacher did, took screenshots of this training and sent those screenshots to Christopher Rufo, who is probably the #1 anti-CRT warrior in the nation right now. And so that all came out. And so CFER was one of the organizations that took that up. There may be an organization similar to that, like-minded. As a matter of fact, I just became the chapter lead for an organization called FAIR. Oh boy, I'm now that I'm the chapter lead, I sure hope I get this right. The Foundation for oh boy, I am a bad FAIR chapter lead, but it's a civil rights organization that has a normal agenda. It's like what the ACL used to be before they went lefty, before they became a leftist indoctrination camp. And so, but there are organizations like that out there. So just search around for them to the best of your ability, and you will find them. And give me 1 second. Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. So I've only been the FAIR guy for less than a week here, so cut me some slack. Don't attack me too much on the social media, please. But it's a great foundation. I'm getting ready to get introduced to them next week, and then I'm going to give a presentation to the chapter leads across the nation the week after, and I'm really looking forward to it. And part of what my job will be is to take in complaints and concerns from parents on issues exactly like this. And it is not a left or right organization. It is an organization that believes in freedom and free speech for everyone, which is, I think, a very good thing.
Indeed.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Well, let me chance jumping into the election thing really quick, because we do have some interesting stuff on that, and that is going to be one of the things at stake in this election coming up, I guess. And so, Jane, maybe you could bring up the visual here. Trump actually went to an interview, I guess, or to a discussion group that was, I guess, a black journalist discussion group. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but
the National Association of Black Journalists.
Okay, so that's it, and so they immediately, for one of the early questions they hit him with out of the box was that some Republicans are calling Kamala Harris a DEI hire, and so I thought it was kind of an interesting exchange. And so, James, we do have video. Can you show KOL number 1?
Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition of
Sir,
that.
I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me, if you would.
I just defined.
So one of the things that jumped out right away is, what are we even talking about for sure here? Now, he wasn't being accused of saying it himself, but he was being, I guess, hit with this. And what are we even talking about? But he does give an answer. And so that's in the next short here. So, James, can you play KOL number 2 so we can hear?
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
She has always identified as a Black woman.
I respect either
Black.
one.
So he respects either one. But this goes to kind of the craziness of all this, right? Because which group is more important and all this. But then the question, too, of, well, does a DEI hire, what does that even mean, as far as was somebody just hired because of their race? Well, I think unequivocally we can say yes, because this is literally what Biden said himself, who's the one who hired her. Maybe we could play KOL clip number 3 so we can hear Biden talking about the races of the people he appoints.
I committed that if I'm elected president and have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first Black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's long overdue. Secondly, if I'm elected president, my cabinet, my administration will look like the country. And I commit that I will, in fact, I'll pick a woman to be vice president. There are a number.
It's all about treating people with dignity. And it's about making sure that, look, for example, look at the heat I'm getting because I named the Secretary of Defense to a Black man. I named Ketanji Brown. Because of the people I've named.
So he couldn't even remember the name of his own Secretary of Defense, except that he was a Black man.
You couldn't remember that. This is the hypocrisy of these people, okay? The nasty hypocrisy, I should say, because they are very proud of the DEI programs. They're very proud of it. Oh, we should be teaching it to kids. We'll be teaching it to everybody, okay? Biden said, I'm going to show you how DEI good I am. I'm going to appoint the first Black woman to the court. I'm going to have a woman as vice president. And when people on the right point out, wait a second, so you have a DEI hire, all of a sudden that becomes a pejorative. They were just proud of the whole thing. They're proud of these programs. But now, if I pointed out, or if George pointed out, it's a pejorative to say that, maybe Kamala is a DEI hire. Maybe that woman on the court who don't know the definition of a woman, maybe she's a DEI hire too. It's suddenly, and you see that woman, Rachel Scott, was asking Trump the question. She's one of the most dishonest reporters there are on ABC News. I wouldn't go into details, but one of the most dishonest people out there. But anyway, that's just my rant.
That was a good rant, Leon. As someone who's been a student of the media for 35 years, believe me, they are the most dishonest people in the world. They're liars, cheaters, and stealers.
Yes.
If they thought they could make a nickel off you, they'd sell your grandmother. I mean, they are not good people, not at all.
Well, as we wrap this issue up, too, I wanted to show a few issues that contrast as well. So, Jane, maybe you could bring this visual up. Trump waited till the end of his administration, but in the last year of his administration, he actually saw some of these programs being propagandized throughout government, and he said, "Hey, we're going to put an end to it." Well, when Biden came into office, he immediately put these programs back into place. So this does show you what's at stake here as this is going on. And if you recall during COVID, Biden wanted to prioritize race in who got help first in some of these things. So, I mean, this is real stuff. It plays out in real ways in our society beyond just thinking abstractly about what's happening in education too, as well. And in fact, even we can remember here, one of the most bizarre things during the whole COVID thing was, Pelosi and all of the Democrats kneeling down wearing Kente cloths to show their solidarity of, I guess, with race. And it turned out it was a tribe of slave traders. That were the colors they were representing. But getting back to our current thing, you look at the groups that are even fundraising for Kamala Harris now, and it's White Dudes for Harris raise over $4 million. There's also a group called White Women for Kamala. When did we have groups that identify themselves by color to go and support different candidates? It just seems bizarre. And one of the craziest things was, Ben Stiller, they had a group where they were talking about comedians that were for Kamala Harris. And one of the crazy things that came out of that is he had a quote that totally got down about race again. I don't understand how these people can't stay away from race, but maybe we could play the clip, James. It's KOL4, and it's just absolutely bananas what Ben Stiller says to the people who are getting together online to raise money for Kamala Harris.
Everybody's got to get out and vote and donate. And she's also a historic candidate. It's going to be the first woman president. And that's incredibly exciting. And, she's Indian, she's Black, she's everything. You can be more than one thing. It's incredible. I'm Jewish and Irish. I wish I was Black. Every white Jewish guy wishes he was Black. It's just get out there and vote and donate.
So everything devolves into race with these people. It's bizarre.
That's the kind of stuff that makes it hard to watch television and movies these days. I tend my television viewing habits tend to be Storage Wars, Pawn Stars, Island Adventures, and movies from the 60s and the 70s, because when I see something like that, I can't watch Ben Stiller on screen anymore. What I'm thinking, the only thing I'm thinking is this, and all of this stupid things that he's saying, think of these Hollywood people. They don't realize, in order for me to watch a movie that he's in, I have to like him. And he just alienated half the country, more than half the country with those comments, and just, without going too deep, Joseph McCarthy from the 50s, I'm sure you guys remember him, and or remember of him. And he accused 300 KGB agents of working in America to undermine the United States, and they ran him out of all. Oh, you're crazy, you're insane, blah blah blah. When the Soviet Union fell in the early 90s, they let American researchers into their archives, everything, and they found these in the Venona files. They found that there were not 300 KGB agents working in America. There were 3,000 KGB agents working in America, working in Hollywood, education, the press, and government. And if you look at each of those four institutions today, which ones are over the top Marxist. Those are the four. And, Ben Stiller, another spoiled rich kid. Even Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels grew up as spoiled rich kids. It seems like all these little Marxists are spoiled rich kids. So I mean, he grew up rich, famous, became rich and famous himself, and what is he doing? He's calling for Marxism. So now that he's got his, now he's going to make it difficult for the rest of us to catch up and make our own. Yeah.
And some of those KGB agents were working in high places in the Roosevelt and in the Truman administration.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, and you see, this is the kind of thing, they always come up with these kind of talking about this DEI stuff.
This is crazy. Yeah, it is crazy. Doesn't mean it isn't true.
Ben Stiller, isn't true. Right. I used to like Ben Stiller, but then he comes up with this damn nonsense about Kamala. You know what they're doing right now? You know what's the nice little racist nonsense they're doing right now? You see Ben Stiller say, oh, she's Asian, or she's Indian, she's black, and that kind of stuff. Kamala's father is from Jamaica, okay?
Right.
And what they're doing, trying to tell you right now, is the little racist nonsense. If you're Jamaican, you must be black, which is nonsense, okay? About 25% of Jamaicans are not black. Well, they may have some black in them, but they're mostly not black, okay? I'm from Trinidad. And if you could say Trinidad equal black, well, we have about 45% of the population who are Indian. All right. So this is the kind of nonsense they're trying to do. This sleight of hand. Well, he's Jamaican, so he must be black. So all of a sudden, Kamala becomes black. Okay. Kamala's father himself says he has white in him, and you see they go through all these gyrations because now it's election times, and now they need the votes of blacks. So now those stupid black people is going to believe that Kamala is really black. So all of a sudden we're going to vote for Kamala. Because we're so
Leon, if Elizabeth Warren can be American Indian, then I guess
Kamala
can be black.
Pocahontas, right? I have maybe 1,000 blood of Indian in me. So that make me Native American, so I can have all the benefits of Native Americans. This is the craziness. What about we go back to the world where we are just all human beings and we live or die on our merit and our competence? How about going back to that world? It works pretty good, It really works pretty good. Some people is going to get ahead, some people won't. But what
sounds like a great idea. A great idea. Wow. I do have one fun fact about the Harvard professor. They came back with her DNA test, and she was less than 1% American Indian.
Yes.
Now they say that your average white person has 2 to 3% Neanderthal DNA. So, going by those numbers, she was more Neanderthal than she was American Indian.
We know, and it's funny too because Trump joked that I think he was at least as American Indian as Elizabeth Warren was. But it just underscores the fact that this is just so much cult thing, just so diving in and this crazed focus on race, and it sort of brings us to the wrapping up the show here on our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, which is the height of these thinkers. There was a guy named Ibram X. Kendi, and he's since kind of fallen to disgrace because he was given a lot of money for a foundation at one of the big schools, and a lot of it just sort of disappeared. But he was one of the big people who was driving this movement in the last few years, and he was at the Aspen Ideas Festival a couple of years ago, and he was asked a simple, straightforward question for a guy who wrote a book on anti-racism. So this is a racism expert, and he was asked a question, and John McWhorter actually he put the video of that out on his Twitter feed, but I have a page here that talks about it, and Ibram X. Kendi was just asked the definition of what is racism. You'd think that would be a simple thing for him to do, and let's find out exactly what happened here. James, can you play KNP number 1?
And I'm wondering, I just finished reading Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, and I think she did like an excellent job of defining racism as like a system of oppression as opposed to like a personal choice. It's like, it's there, you benefit from it, or you don't. That's its purpose. You talked about the importance of defining racism, but I unless I missed it, which is possible, I didn't hear your personal definition. Is there one that you would offer us? Like, how do you define racism?
Okay, so that was the question. Now let's hear Kendi's answer. KNP2, James.
Sure. So racism, I would define it as a collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. Sure. A collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. And anti-racism is pretty simple, using the same terms. Anti-racism is a collection of anti-racist policies leading to racial, anybody want to take a guess? Equity that are substantiated by anti-racist ideas.
He doesn't
So
look
I
that
guess if
sure.
somebody,
He doesn't look that sure.
I guess if somebody asked me what's an engineer do for a living, and I was an expert on engineers, I'd say he does engineering kind of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't you understand? He does engineering type of things. That's what an engineer does.
One of the things we talked about with the media organizing toolkit from NYU is the importance of talking points. And one of my talking points that I tend to use over and over is that anti-racists are the most racist people in the world. I also say liberals are the most racist people in the world.
Yes.
And Ibram X. Kendi has said some of the most racist things you've ever heard of in your entire life. And, and that goes with like Antifa, anti-fascist, the most fascist people in America today. You don't agree with them, they're going to come and burn your house down. So it's anti-racism. It's, again, accuse, and this is a popular thing on the left, and a lot of people say it's due to what is that guy? I can't believe I'm slipping his name right now. But if you're doing something, accuse your opponent of doing that same thing. And so that is what it kind of boils down to. Rules for Radicals. Who's the author of Rules for Radicals? I can't. I'm having a mind.
That's Saul Alinsky.
Saul Alinsky, right? A lot of people credit him with that, but when I went through the book, I did not find that particular statement, but I found a lot of similar things in there. But anyway, that's your typical leftist strategy. They're racist, so I'm going to defeat racism by being a racist, just like I'm going to fight crime by throwing a rock through a window and stealing everything out of this store. It's that same logic. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense.
I read his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I read the book. It was the worst amount of money I ever spent. I have never seen as much racism in 400 pages than I've seen anywhere that I've ever read. And I've read a lot over my 68 years. You just can't imagine the nonsense that is written in there. And this man became rich over this. He then headed up the Center for Anti-Racism at Boston University or something like that. And he have lost, I think, about $45 million. We have not yet heard what happened to that money. They have very little original research, but the money have just evaporated. Ibram, where's the money, Ibram? We're still waiting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but the Rules for Radicals, if you open the book and look at the beginning, the introduction, he dedicated it to Lucifer. The first radical, according to him. So that kind of gives you the mindset. And a lot of today's left, they admire this man's work like it's their Bible. And I do cover the book a little bit in one of the chapters that I cover. But Hillary Clinton, that was the topic of her master's thesis. President Obama admired his work and used his strategies when he was a community organizer in Chicago. They honor this guy, and he honored Satan. So.
Well, that sounds like a great place to end it all on. But this whole movement is a cult tied to Satan, I guess. But anyways, George, I did want to bring up your book one last time, and Jane, maybe you could bring up. This is your Facebook page. If you want to go check out more from George, you can follow him on his Facebook page, Critical Race Theory in Your Schools: How to Fight Back. That's also the name of the book as well that you can find on Amazon. Did you have a final kind of a parting thought you wanted to leave the audience with?
Well, just that I use my Facebook page for a couple of things. When this podcast comes out, I'll share the link to this podcast on that Facebook page. But also, I post near daily updates. When I run across a news story about critical race theory or about DEI, I post it out there. And then that way, if someone is interested in keeping up on the very latest on critical race theory without doing all the hard work themselves, you can go to my Facebook page and you can just kind of check in once or twice a week and just check out the stories. And I generally have my own little take on the story at the top, sometimes sarcastic, sometimes funny. Just, that's just kind of the kind of guy that I am. But also, if you want to talk to me, reach out, direct message me. I'm more than happy to engage in this conversation, and I love hearing from people. So please, if you have any questions, stop by the Facebook page, or if you just want to keep up on the latest, stop by the Facebook page.
Okay, so that's been great, George. And I also wanted to point out to our listeners as well, Constitution Day is coming up in Folsom, September 15th. So put that on your calendar. Should be pretty good locally. Hopefully, I think I might be out there too as well. So hopefully it'll be a fun event. So thanks so much, George, for coming in and sharing your thoughts on CRT with us and what we can do about it in our schools. And if you're watching, before next week, think of what you can do in your community to also join the fight, because there's so many different ways they're moving against our liberty. This is just one of them. So think about how you can get involved in the fight. Maybe it's just helping out your local Libertarian Party, or joining, maybe running for a school board office, something like that. Anything that can help turn this dial in the other direction. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.